just in case. I will put it in the resources tab, but in case you want to go back and look at it later or something. So, all right, let me find here. Today's the 6th, right? So yeah, so just 2 things for this upcoming week to look at. Chapters, I'm going to talk a little bit about 6 and 7, and then kind of touch on student outcome 3, which will have similar options to last week. And then also look ahead a little bit for some different things. But 6, 7, and 8 for sure chapters have some content, but a lot of like examples of strategies and different components around differentiated instruction. So while there's not like a whole lot of information, I mean, there's good information and a lot of good examples and connections to different grade levels, different subjects, in terms of some things that can do in classrooms and stuff for differentiation. So we'll go over some of those we'll go over chapters 6 and 7 a little bit tonight. There won't be a whole lot, like I said, of information, but we'll go over that. I do want to, I guess, talk about or see what you guys want to do next Monday. I'll be out of town, actually next Sunday through Thursday, but so I don't know if you want to do like Monday night. I can't do the class, but there would be some other evenings where in the week where I could. I know Tuesdays are out for you guys with Travis, but do you want to try to do something a different night, or do you want me to do a video for chapters 8 and 9 and send that out? Think about that a little bit, I guess, and then at the end of the class we can talk about that a little bit. But just a heads up there that I'm not available on that Monday night next week. So anyway. So I'm going to touch base on chapters 6 and 7 here a little bit. You look at the PowerPoint, there's only 5. I only put together 5 slides because it is, like I said, a lot of examples in the book there. But chapter 6 talks about like some of the principles of differentiation, and then also some examples of some things that teachers can and oftentimes do, like differentiate in the classroom. So as I'm going through these, if you have questions or examples or just want to comment on any of the components, just interrupt me and let me know that you have questions. So okay, thanks, Donette. It talks about teachers, and even this, I believe, to be in general, not just in differentiated instruction classrooms, right? But we don't have all the answers, but we have ways of finding the answers. It talks about, it says determination and optimism, right? We kind of are open-ended, open-minded a little bit in regards to that. And I think that goes not just to teachers, but that goes to good leaders in schools, in organizations, in business. If you think you have to have all the answers, and that if you don't have it, you're not worthy to be a leader or be a teacher or be in charge or whatever, that shouldn't be the case. You know, sometimes people struggle with that a little bit in terms of like, I don't know if it's their ego or what it is, but like they think that because they're in charge, they should know all the answers and everything. But it's okay to not know those components, right? So especially if we're working to differentiate and we're working with students, we're working to meet them at their level, we're working to know whether or not they you know, where their readiness level is, what they know, some different, you know, how they learn best. So some of the things in terms of a strategy, we may not fully know how to implement, but we want to be open to know that maybe we can get there at some point. Okay, so if you look at these different principles here of the differentiated instruction classroom, I think these are, you know, some important points to remember. But invitational learning, the invitational learning environment is pivotal in student achievement. Okay, so you think of that invitational learning environment. So think of the classroom environment, right? Is it welcoming? Is it a place where students might feel comfortable? Is it inviting, kind of like the word talks about right there? There's lots of things that would make a student feel invited, comfortable, welcome, and ready for students to try to achieve or to take a risk, right? To try something new, to try something different, to maybe possibly fail, right? So we want our classroom, we want the environment that we're working within to be very inviting, right? For those students or those people we work with. Another thing that's important, quality curriculum provides the foundation for powerful differentiation. Okay, so quality curriculum, okay, it can and does look like a lot of different things, right? So if we think of curriculum, that's the material that we are teaching our students. And so curriculum can look like a box of curriculum, right? There's maybe a textbook, there's workbook pages, there's software, there's all kinds of stuff. That can be a curriculum. A curriculum can be something that we put together on our own as a teacher, collection of books, collection of articles, collection of manipulatives, collection of activities that we have found online. So there's lots of different ways to get a quality curriculum together. So because we might have something in a box per se, doesn't necessarily mean that it's good quality. We might have to modify it, add to it, change things a little bit. So if we have that quality curriculum, though, that is kind of like it says our foundation. We can manipulate, change, and differentiate that curriculum for our students, right? We can, for those that are struggling or below grade level, we can adapt it so that they can have some success and gain some skills. And those that are achieving or advanced, we can give them some work. We can give them some activities so that they can go above and beyond, or they can really drill down on a specific idea or concept to maybe enhance what they're learning. Okay. You guys have any questions or comments on like quality curriculum or what that might mean, or even what that might look like to you? Okay. Okay. All right. Formative assessment informs teaching and learning. Okay. So formative assessment is that ongoing assessment while we're teaching, right? Summative assessment is that stuff at the end, right? It's a chapter quiz, it's a big project. So if we're doing formative assessment, that will help us change some of the things that we're doing if we need to. All right. So if we're doing an assessment or we're teaching a lesson and the kids are working on an activity, and we see all of the students struggling on that activity. They're all asking questions. They're all, getting wrong answers or whatever it might be. Then we know that, okay, I got to shift what I'm doing, right? We have to either go back and reteach something a different way. I got to do a different activity. I didn't explain the directions good enough, whatever it might be. Those formative assessments are those small pieces in between, right? And so that is important while we're going through lessons, activities, those different components. So that really helps us, with some of this differentiation piece as well, because if we don't assess how the students are doing while they're working on something, we're not really helping them grow and develop. We're just waiting till the end to say, oh, you got an F on this project or this test or this quiz. Sorry, you didn't learn it, and then go on to the next one. That's not really helping the students. And that definitely is not differentiation. Okay? And same can be said for if we're working with people, if we're teacher leaders, or if we're not even working in the classroom. We don't do formative assessments with people we supervise, but we might be like assessing what they're doing, before the end of the year evaluation or whatever that might be. So if we see something that, is not working or they're struggling with, not doing right, we hopefully as good leaders would help them and say, hey, why don't you try this? Or maybe this would be, an idea to help you, with that. We're not going to leave it to the end and say, oh, sorry, you did well, some might, but hopefully good leaders would say, wouldn't just leave it till the end and say, oh, you're fired because you didn't do a good enough job. Hopefully that we would help them along the way, especially in the classrooms. So fourth thing talks about instruction. is based on formative assessment, like I've talked about, looking at the readiness, the interest, and the learning profile needs. I believe it was last week, or maybe it was the week before, where we talked about student readiness, student interest, and their learning profile, right? So the learning profile could also be based on like multiple intelligences, right? Different ways that students learn. Some learn very well just by listening. Some like videos, some need hands-on, some prefer to do group work, some prefer to work by themselves. There's a lot of different ways that students learn, or what their learning profile might look like. Okay? And then the last thing, teacher leadership and flexible classroom routines prepare students to understand, contribute, and succeed in a differentiated environment. So we as teachers have to have that, like I've said a little bit here, leadership piece, right? So we can help guide them through these routines. Now, a lot of times in classrooms and even in organizations, routines are important, right? Because that gives students a sense of schedule, knowing what's coming. But we also want to be a little bit flexible in some of those routines to help those students who need that differentiation, right? Who need that extra time maybe on an assignment, or they might need some quiet time, or whatever it might be. But we have to be a little bit flexible in a few of those routines to help those students. Any questions or comments on these principles? Okay. What's going on here? Okay, so I know we've talked about this before, but again, we can, as teachers, we have content, the process, the product, right, that we differentiate, things that we can control and change, and also our learning environment, the classroom, right, a little bit how we set it up, when we're doing projects, activities, assessments, what that looks like, right? So we can help control, we can change, we can modify all those products different times. We do not want to modify them all the time because that would be way too much, okay? Another thing, I'm going to skip down here a little bit and look at the last two things before they talk about a bunch of examples here, are looking at the fact or skill focused instruction. Okay, so you think about some subjects, math, reading, language arts, even social studies, there are certain facts, there's certain skills that students need, right, to progress forward. And so if we think about how those are taught, if we teach some of those skills in isolation, right, that might be kind of go back to your drill and kill type things of like, multiplication, for example, in math, or even addition, subtraction. Sometimes if we do that too much, the students don't see the relevance of that, right? Why do we have to do 50 multiplication problems to understand, how to do that? So if we can connect those more, right, to like real world problems. So if you think a lot of teachers do now, if we think of like in math, for example, word problems that might have a relevance or a real community like connection, that might seem more realistic than just the overuse or the drill and kill component for some of those skill pieces. So we want to make sure that we are working together with the students, giving them some connection to some real world components, right? But also they do need to understand they got to practice some of these skills depending on what subject it is, so that they have that and it comes easy to them as they move forward. One of the examples that they give here, and there's tons of them, not just examples of content, but like if you look at the book, they talk about, first grade, fourth grade, second grade, talking about language arts, science, all kinds of even PE classes. So I'm not gonna like talk about those examples, but because I know you guys can read those examples. But an example they talk about here is the jigsaw. Okay? Have you guys heard of the jigsaw idea or the jigsaw component? I saw Nanette shake her head. So if you do, you may have heard it as something else, or maybe not even the name of it, but obviously you know what a jigsaw puzzle is, right? There's multiple pieces of it and you kind of fit them together in terms of a puzzle. So a jigsaw for for example, of differentiation would be that you have a concept, you have an idea, and there's multiple parts to it. Well, you might split your class into smaller groups, give each of those groups a part of that topic, a part of that concept, a part of that idea. They research it, they work on it, they study it, and then they present that information to their rest of their classmates in whatever way they want to present it. You know, maybe it's a little video, maybe it's a PowerPoint, maybe it's they get up and talk about it. They share it as a group, whatever that looks like. But if you do a jigsaw, you're taking a bigger concept and you're breaking it up in smaller parts. And then each of those groups becomes the expert, so to say, in that area. And then they report that back to their classmates, or they share that information in a different way with their classmates. Okay? And so that's one way, you know, that's a jigsaw, and that's one way that you can do differentiation. You know, how that might look for fact components, that's something that might be a little easier to do than skill-focused instruction, right? A skill-focused instruction, students all have to learn exactly how to do some of those skills, but for fact information, it'd be easier to do that jigsaw piece of that than in that skilled-focused instruction. And that can be used at any grade level, kindergarten all the way through 12th grade, and even seen it done in college classes and stuff before as well. So. The other one that it talks about here and gives a lot of examples of in chapter 6 is concept and meaning-based instruction, right? So here we're talking about trying to integrate several different levels, or maybe even all levels of learning facts, learning concepts, attitudes, skills, different principles. And so focusing on, again, another way to do this is the jigsaw piece, but looking at focusing all students on making meaning of what they are learning, and having a very rich starting point, meaning there's a lot of information that you might need to cover and share and learn. So if you spread that out amongst the students, the groups, then they can work together to help each other understand it. So sometimes when you're doing these types of things, if you have it talks about very rich starting point and a lot of information, you might group students together with similar interests, similar readiness levels, and you can disperse or give them different topics based upon their readiness level and their interest level. Right? Other times you're going to want to balance it out a little bit in groups, right? Where you might have a couple stronger students and maybe a couple students who might be struggling, so that maybe they can help each other out a little bit. You don't want to put, if you're going to have students present, you don't want to put a group of students together where everyone is shy to get up and talk in the front of the class. Some of those things. You also want to make sure you have somebody that's willing to share and talk and those different things. So jigsawing students or putting students together in groups, you kind of have to know your students a little bit with that as well. So, but make sure, take a look at the book, take a look at these examples. It's got PE, high school biology, world languages, spelling for chapter 6, 7th grade cement, how to review components, patterns. There's just a ton of good examples in the book here. So questions you guys have on this part here on some of these different components, but concept, meaning-based instruction, fact and skill-focused instruction, and then some of these principles here of things that we want to kind of have as our foundation for a differentiated instruction classroom. Any questions on those? Okay. All right. Like I said, chapter 7 is very similar in terms of the content, not a whole lot of content, but it talks more about strategies and examples of these strategies. And I think some of these strategies you guys probably, like Chrissy probably knows and even uses some of these, but some of them are a little bit new or maybe not used as much as some of the other ones. But I think stations, for example, in terms of instructional strategy, just different spots in the classroom where kids can work on either the same lesson or a different lesson. You might differentiate, a lesson based on the student's ability levels. Math, science, reading, language arts, all of them. You can definitely differentiate. And so when you do stations, you might do a whole group activity, whole group, concept, lesson, conversation, and then break out into smaller groups where they're working on different different levels of that task potentially. Okay, so when you do these stations, it talks about here flexible grouping. Okay, meaning that you don't necessarily have the same group of students working at a station all the time. It might adjust based upon the topic that you're teaching or the concept that you're teaching. So, but stations, I think, is a very good way. They might also be called centers, when you're talking about younger elementary or even early childhood. A lot of times they call those centers, where those are out for a certain period of time and then they rotate through. But this is a good, I don't want to say it's an easy way, but it's a good way to do some differentiation when you can break up students into these different stations, so to say. Okay. Another strategy that they talk about are agendas. Okay, we've all heard of meeting agendas, right? But so if we look at this in terms of like a differentiated instructional strategy, this agenda here is a personalized list of tasks that a student has to complete in a specific time. Okay? And so again, this could be, on a concept, right? And so you might, this could be done a variety of ways, right? And so every day you might have, a small group work or a small, get together conversation, and then the students break out and they start working on their agenda. Okay, so, but it's, this list of tasks that they need to complete. They have, you can set it up to give them the option of which order they will complete them in. A time frame, this could be 2 to 3 weeks. You could even do it for 1 to 2 days, depending upon what you wanted to cover, what you were talking about. It also talks about using these as an anchor activity. Okay, so you have this. An anchor activity is something that is, I don't want to say it's always there, but something that students can do if they're working on an assignment or they're done with whatever it is they might be working on. There's always this activity that they can fall back on, and maybe it's something that is for a certain unit that you're doing, or maybe it's something like a whole year type project or theme. But whatever that anchor activity is, it's something that students can do and work on and look to when they're done with other work, for example. So doing things this way with these agendas gives us as teachers a lot more freedom to move about the classroom, do some progress monitoring, provide more feedback, maybe some one-on-one help when needed. And so it's a different way to allow students a little bit of flexibility and to give them some choice and a little bit of, I don't want to say freedom in what they're working on or when they're working on it, because they get some options in the order of how they want to work on different assignments and topics. So anybody ever heard of this concept idea before or used it for anything at all? Chrissy's shaking her head, yes. Probably something we do a lot of as adults, right? Where we put the order of, I'm going to work on this first or this second, or, and then we go through and cross things off of our list as we're kind of going through that. Honestly, that's how if I'm struggling to, like, if I'm feeling disorganized or there's too many things like going on, sometimes I know I have stuff to do, but I'm feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes I'll just sit there and not do anything because I don't know what to do next. But once I start writing a list down of all the things that I have to do, sometimes I'll number them, and then I do a simple one first, and I get that done, and I feel better. And you kind of start working through that process. It helps me a lot. So if you guys are feeling overwhelmed with any work, any assignments, or any thesis components, that's something that I found that does help, is to jot down a list of to-do things and cross them out as you go. So. Another component it talks about here is complex instruction, and it gives, like I said, it has a lot of examples on the complex instruction. But So what this does is it requires students to work together in small groups typically, draws upon the intellectual strengths of each student in the group. It's open-ended. It's usually or intrinsically interesting to students, whatever the concept might be. So if it's intrinsically interested, meaning that they're motivated or that's an interest to them, right? It allows this complex instruction grouping allows for multiple solutions or multiple right answers when you're trying to find solutions to problems, for example. Typically it involves real objects of some kind, but you're looking at this equity or quality of learning, okay, for all students in the context of intellectually challenging material. So if you've got something that you're teaching them or working through that's very like complex or takes multiple steps, it's probably a good idea to break it up into smaller steps, into groups, and to have those students work together. And we talk about like heterogeneous grouping, meaning that you're grouping student, it's like a mixed ability grouping often, okay? So that you can have multiple people working together, multiple ability levels to try to solve and work through like a complex problem. It talks about these tasks on page 113 of the book. Those are a few of the things that I was looking at, but or talking about. But there's a lot of different components to the complex instruction piece. So this is not something that you do in a day, but it would be something that you would carry on over, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever that might look like. But you have a lot of resources that you use for this complex instruction strategy. And that you can, give the students time to dig into and find solutions, problems, answers for the concept that you're teaching. Okay. You can also find out a little bit more about your students using this strategy. You can find out students who want to seek tasks, using their different intellectual abilities, right? And if they're able to help others, work together with others. We're looking at students to look at their individual strengths. If we see a group that might be struggling and they don't have, a good leader or something, you could always shift groups, shift people around. So we want to make sure when we have use this complex instructional strategy, that we're monitoring students so that we don't see a group really struggling, and that we can shift it or change it if we need to. Okay. The last one to talk about here that I put in here is this orbital studies. Okay. Orbital studies is kind of an independent investigation, right? And looking at, of course, about some aspect of the curriculum. Okay, so this might be something you're talking about in social studies about World War II, and there's lots of topics that go into World War II, right? And so maybe you give the students the option of picking a topic, a concept within that for them to dig into and study more while you're doing, your other lectures, your quizzes, things like that. So this would be an extra way or a different way for students to dig deeper into a concept when there's really a lot of information to be studied. So it's one way to go about doing that, and then it develops student expertise in an area as well. And here we talk about using rubrics for the students so that they kind of understand, the process, the steps, the way they can go about doing these studies, and what they need or what you want them to look for. It does help and can help sometimes to create a list of topics. Sometimes students struggle with topics. They can get information from their parents as well in terms of some ideas. So the orbital studies, again, is just another way for them to learn a little bit more about a concept, also giving them some of that interest or allowing them their own interest to come out in the topic or the concept. Okay, and that was in that chapter was the last example, right? Yep, chapters 8 and maybe even 9. Chapter 8, and then also what we'll talk about next week, provides more strategies on that piece of differentiation as well. So questions about any of these activities or these strategies?
Yeah, that first part. Factor skill focused instruction.
On this chapter, in chapter 7?
I think it's 6 with all those examples. Again. Differentiating factor skill focused instruction. I didn't really pay attention what she said. My bad.
Fact or skill focused instruction, this one?
Yeah, I was trying to find it and then I didn't listen to what you said.
So we're talking about fact and skill focused instruction. You want to try to make that connection to like, you don't want to just do it in isolation, right? I think I talked about like, I gave like multiplication, for example. All of us probably had worksheets where we had to do like 50 problems of like single digit multiplication to learn our like times tables and stuff like that, which is fine to a point, but we also want to connect, if we can connect those skills to like real world problems, right? Like a lot of, in math now, a lot of teachers will use like word problems, right? And so a word problem has a real connection to, you know, multiplication, addition, you know, I mean, all kinds of stuff, not just those things, but if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I talked about that jigsaw piece in there a little bit too, with that activity, which is, you know, that jigsaw is students taking a part of a larger concept and kind of studying it, research it, becoming almost a so-called expert on it, and then sharing that information back with the rest of their class, right? And that would probably do more, that would fall more in this fact-based information, right? Rather than a skill-focused instruction. Because facts are facts, right? It's the truth, and it's not going to be changed probably, and you just have to maybe try to remember it. Where a skill is something that we all need to know how to do or remember or use, and so we're going to have to practice, you know, that in a variety of ways. Whereas facts, sometimes we can just remember them or jot them down in notes and look back at them later or whatever that might be.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, right on. Other questions?
Hey, how was my lesson plan for real?
Yeah, it was good. I saw your note this morning. I think it was this morning. And yeah, I mean, it was good. I got some stuff I'll send you on that. I mean, there's not, or maybe I did send you. I can't remember, but I will send you some notes on that.
Trying to work on this UBD for Travis. Oh, it's hard for me.
Sure. Use some of those same concepts that you had. That's a universal design,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I don't want to ask him because he'll explain things for an hour and not even answer my simple questions. So I'm kind of struggling. But
so I think, yeah, I'll send you some more, you know, information on your plan, but what you had submitted was good, and I think you could use that in a step of like the universal design component, because you're talking about like building backwards from what you want, you know, the students to accomplish, and then you kind of, you know, go back to the beginning piece of that, I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of standards.
Sure. Yep.
So, what's today's going on?
Yep, there is a ton in there, yeah.
Fine, yeah.
I
We
was
have-
like,
We have questions too. Hold up.
and I always like the term, like, you can't reinvent the wheel, you know what I mean? So
Yep.
Donna, like, there's all kinds of like things online that you
Yeah,
can kind of like pick up and like get an idea of how to follow along with it and all that.
yeah.
They say
I
don't
mean,
reinvent the wheel.
I've been looking at YouTube videos all day. Different things. I was like, how to do a simple one, but I think I'm just making it too hard. Or I don't know. I'm scared. Scared of Travis. Feedback.
Google can be your friend. I'm telling you. I mean, if I look up stuff all the time on Google and YouTube in terms of like, oh man, don't be afraid to use those because you'll find a ton of information out there. Even if you're looking at, examples of, universal design lessons or how to go about doing that. There's on anything in education, there's a ton of resources on that, but definitely do not be afraid to Google it or use YouTube or whatever.
Okay. Did you guys use that where to part at the end? I'm trying to, but shit, that's all I could say. I'm gonna try, I guess, but I'll get there, I guess.
Okay, I'm gonna pull this one up. Outcome 3. This one talks about analyzing and evaluating differentiated lessons taught by other teachers. Okay? Obviously, you're not going to observe somebody in the classroom, right, teaching, but looking at other lesson plans, looking at other components, strategies, those types of things. So this kind of covers chapters 5 and 6 in the textbook a little bit, right? And so if you remember to go to the resources tab, excuse me, and down to outcome 2, there's a universal design video review right here. So it's a little bit connected to the other class as well. So here we have, there's again this iris module option for you in this outcome, right? I mean, it might take a little bit longer to do, but you have those specific questions you could answer and turn those in. But there's a variety of resources here as well in terms of looking at different types of lessons, right? So here we have the WOLAKOTA website or the WOLAKOTA project, and you'll have a lot of resources here specifically connected to culture and language components, even some lesson plans here on the right hand side. There's just a ton of information here. Okay. I don't know if you've seen, I probably should have double checked this one. It's probably gone. Nope. So if you haven't seen this one, here's another universal universal design component, which takes a look at lesson planning, differentiation components as well. So this one here also talks about a layered type of curriculum. Which talks about building that curriculum from, that's not the right one I wanted to look at. So this is very similar to like scaffolding, right? Where you have you're building upon, previous lessons, previous ideas. So it's working to, like, if you had to build your own curriculum, for example, how to layer it together so you can scaffold and build upon that, how to design it, create it. So again, it's not necessarily looking at specific lesson plans and components, but it is another way to look at building, designing, putting curriculum components together. And of course, this here is this is just the Oceti Shikoan Essential Standards and Understandings homepage, which is not there. I will put that back up this evening when we're done. But I think you probably have access to those components already. So, so again, same thing as last week. I've got most of your stuff graded, but I'll have it graded by tomorrow morning to send you guys feedback on the outcome piece of that. But you have, again, this option of this this IRIS module if you want to do that. Same type of process, but this is on UDL component, so that might be another resource for you to net for Travis's class. But this says estimated completion time 2.5 hours. I don't know if it really actually takes that long, but you can probably do it a little bit better or a little bit quicker than that. So so yeah. So again, looking at other differentiated lessons, not necessarily that you're observing them, teaching them, but just kind of looking at them and looking at some resources and some ways of differentiating different components with that. Okay.
So,
go ahead,
yeah,
Chrissy.
So what are you asking?
So
can you say that?
Can you talk, or can you show me that like you can understand it, even though these are not necessarily specific differentiated lesson plans, but if you look at ideas, concepts, you know, for example, once I pull up these, once I have the right link here to the OSEUS components, they have like outlines, right, of information. They don't have specific lesson plans, but can you like tell me if you would look at that? Oh yeah, here's an idea, and I can see that you could include, you know, agendas here in this, or you could use the centers or the station component of that. So again, kind of looking that you can understand, or that you can show me where you might include or that they did include certain differentiated strategies. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, yep, because that's what kind of chapters, kind of 6 really, and even 5 a little bit, talk a little bit more about those instructional strategies for differentiation. So we're kind of starting to look at those pieces of that, along with a little bit of lesson planning pieces, which is kind of falls in with this like universal design piece. Other questions on this outcome? Okay. So I'll have your stuff graded. I'll work on that tonight and tomorrow morning. So you'll have feedback for that by tomorrow morning or tomorrow noonish, somewhere around there. But the stuff that I'm looking at and have looked at, you guys are doing great with that. I am able to tell that you're definitely understanding the differentiation component and kind of what it's all about. So so keep up the good work. You guys are doing fine in here. So other questions on anything in general or comments?